Welcome to today's Fire Engineering Google Hangout. Today we got a great show for you. It's an honor to have the Chief of Hartford, Connecticut's Fire Department, Chief Freeman. Welcome. We have the Manager for Strategic Planning from Hartford, Leo. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
I'm here with PJ Norwood. Leo's father is looking on to make sure that he stays on the straight and narrow. He's a retired deputy. And we have Sam Villani, who has too many titles with too many abbreviations in it for me to even come up with it, but he's a captain in Montgomery County and he oversees the interoperability for Montgomery County, and I'll let him further explain how that goes in. This show came about because of a personal near tragedy with myself. I got trapped in a basement on Benton Street and my radio transmissions didn't get out. And, I've made my way through my career as pretty much never being the smartest guy in the room, but I could always usually tell you who is, and I've been able to navigate that. So to me, a radio is you push it and you talk. I never really, besides the Fire 1 and Fire 2, Fire Officer 1, never really got into the nuts and bolts of how the radio system works. And I got to credit Sam Villani at FDIC of giving a basic class for radios and learning some things that just absolutely blew my mind. Even a dirty radio affects the radio. It's just, so we're going to talk about that. And basically I'll let PJ be the moderator of this because he does such a fine job. If you have any questions, you can hashtag FE Talk and we'll take you through radios. And we want to talk a little bit about strategic planning, because if there's one failure in the fire service across the country, it's failure to plan. It's almost, if it's not on fire, we don't look at it. There was an old joke in New Haven. Somebody sent a letter to a chief, an older chief, and they complained to the union that the chief never got back to them. And I said, well, did you light your letter on fire? And they're like, well, I go, well, if it's not on fire, nobody looks at it in this place. So we need to do a better job planning. So I said credit to your office and you as chief in the Hartford Fire Department. And I think a lot of departments can learn from that. But let's start off with radios. Why don't we have I'll pass the PJ. You can take it around.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Frank. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you tuning in today in the live or the archive version. We always appreciate you joining us. Frank, I think, did a great job of kicking that off because obviously he had a phone call there, so he really didn't want to get me involved. We didn't have a choice today. So this is going to be a good show, but you're not going to hear a lot from me. I'm one of those end users, like the majority of our listeners, Chief, and Leo. I'm one of those end users. I strap the radio on every day, or I get in my car or the rig, and I expect that when I key that radio up, it's going to get to what needs to be done. Who's going to answer it? I know the basics of our system, but I don't know the true nuts and bolts of our system. And I don't think I'm that different from the majority of firefighters or training officers across the country, because the knowledge and the technology that goes involved isn't something you could pick up in an hour class here or kind of pick up over your career. You really have to dedicate that time to learning your individual systems and how they work, because they are all so different. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today. And before we get too deep into it, I just want to give a little plug, like I always do when we talk about communications, because everybody knows my opinion of our communications employees and our dispatchers, who I always know we blame, right? We always throw them under the bus because we don't feel that they really know their job well. And usually what I always like to say, a good percentage of that, not all of that, is kind of our fault, because we don't take the time in the fire service to educate them. So when we go through today and we talk about radios, we talk about radio failures, remember, we always have that other layer of employees, our dispatch employees, who are in a position to hear our calls for help. When you call for a mayday, the statistics show that the chances of the incident commander hearing that mayday is very good if you have a very large, robust department and you have individuals manning a command post. When departments like mine, where your operational staff is your same incident commander staff and you're putting hands on task, that mayday may very well be missed, and your dispatcher is in a position to hear that call for help. So we need to make sure that we take the time to educate and train our communications folks. So when a mayday is transmitted, they know their role. They know their role if the incident commander hears that mayday, but they also know their role if the incident commander doesn't hear that mayday. And if they don't know, that's our fault. That's not their fault. We could talk about the red tape and the bureaucracy within communications all day long. But when it comes down to it, is if I'm on scene and one of my members transmits a mayday, I want my dispatcher to know what their role is. And sometimes that may be just listening. Sometimes that may be giving me that proverbial slap to the radio that, hey, Chief, you just missed that mayday. It was firefighter so-and-so, and this is what they informed us of. Because that may be your firefighter's only opportunity to call for help.
Right.
And we may miss it. So I think that that's an important piece that I don't want to get lost in this good conversation. So before we get to the chief and Leo, I want to just welcome Sam and turn it over to Sam for a quick second to say hello to everybody who's been on our show before. Sam, how's everything down there?
It's going well. You know, it's busy like everybody else. It seems like everybody, every department is if they're not busy call volume, they're busy running the organization, growing the organization. But I just pulled up. So I'm at a busy firehouse in downtown Silver Spring, Maryland, and I don't sleep at the firehouse. So we had one of those sleepless nights last night, and glad to be a part of this. I'm the deputy program manager for our National Capital Region Interoperability Group, Communications Interoperability Group, the NCR CIG. They call us the SIG. We're a national capital region based asset. We're triple redundant. There's a team in Montgomery County, Maryland, a team in Fairfax County, Virginia, and a team in Washington, D.C. And we have a cache of radios, which we can program and make basically work for anything. We can make a small network, a big network. We can tie into existing systems. And then we have interoperability solutions. We have repeaters, bidirectional amplifiers. I won't bore you too much, but we have a lot of tactical solutions. We're looking at, things with our metro system, anything where our radio system can't hit. We have a workaround for it. We have short-term quick ones, and then we have things we can build out and expand upon.
A lot of experience, much more experience in the communication world than I have. And Chief, so I know in Hartford you've done a lot of good things and very progressive, much more progressive than a lot of departments when it comes to communications. And this is just a representation of a strategic planner. So you guys are doing some good things in Hartford. Why don't you talk about that a little bit and talk about what brings you here today and why Frank was really adamant to bring you into this conversation about radios and strategic planning today.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here, especially with my strategic planning manager, Leo, and our former executive officer, Chief Siri, who's sitting in the corner, who's been very instrumental in us developing as a department technology-wise. So for us, I guess let me backtrack just slightly. I was sworn in as chief of the department on February 1st, 2016. And unfortunately, we had our first line of duty death in 40 years on October 7, 2014, when firefighter Kevin Lamont Bell died, unfortunately, on line of duty. And he is a son of Hartford. He's beloved in the community. Everyone in the north end of Hartford knew who Kevin was. And it is something that the department is still coping with. We're still grieving as an organization. And after Kevin's death, there was a board of inquiry. And this board of inquiry was comprised of retired fire chiefs, members of the E-board of the local, and they had discussions and meetings over a course of several months and came up with a document that was approximately 25 pages long with recommendations for changes. Now, being the capital city of the state of Connecticut and a very proud New England Fire Department, that change does not come easy. However, I can say hats off to our membership. They embraced the changes that were forthcoming. First and foremost, it was a mandate that everyone wore hoods. Up until that point, it was fairly optional for us to wear hoods on a working job. We also made changes to several of our operating department directives. Most organizations will call them SOPs or standard operating guidelines. And from there, we created a structural fire ground operations policy. We also revised our RIT program, our Mayday program, and our Incident Safety Officer program as well. So one of the many things that were cited in this report was poor radio capability. And we had struggled with that for literally decades. And for those who are familiar with technology, probably more familiar than I've learned everything I know from Leo in that regard. We were on an 800 megahertz system, and I could say we actually still are on an 800 megahertz system. We literally had areas in the city to where there were dead spots, numerous areas in the cities where there were dead spots. Where it was subterranean, we couldn't get out. In a parking garage, we couldn't get out. In a high rise, we couldn't get out. So I'm the kind of person that would rather ask for forgiveness instead of permission. So I got with Leo, who at the time was in the Fire Alarm Communications Technology Division, which we call FACT for short. And the FACT division, they take care of all our technology needs. They also address all the traffic signals and the walk signs. In most jurisdictions, Public Works does that, but forever, it's been the fire department in Hartford. Leo is being very much underutilized. You know, the way he can process his technical expertise as it pertains to technology with hardware and software is truly second to none. So I immediately detailed him to my office. Although that was a burden to the FACT division, I asked my superintendent of FACT division for his forgiveness in the extra work that the remaining technicians would have, but Leo's skill set was needed at headquarters to help us move the department in the 21st Century Fire Service. So we applied for a grant. We applied for an AFG grant for $1 million approximately, which allowed us to procure Motorola portable and mobile radios, but then also us to obtain their SDI accountability software, which works in conjunction with the Motorola radios. And that was something that I was more excited about, the SDI accountability software. I was more excited about that than I really was excited about the radios. And with that, with the change of the new Motorola's, we had an opportunity to now be P25 compliant. We had the opportunity to now communicate with our mutual aid partners. You know, Hartford is 17 square miles with 124,000 people, daytime population. And we are surrounded by approximately 1.2 million people in the Hartford greater area. So it was a no-brainer what we had to do, and we pulled the trigger. We got the grant. And that same year, we got a grant for $11 million to hire 70 firefighters because we had a mass exodus, and we were already short 40 firefighters. The mayor told me I'd have a great opportunity to lead and manage the department as I saw fit. He did not tell me that we were broke. I learned that on my first day, but we overcame those challenges. So those new radios, obviously, for them to function at the capacity they were designed to, I made a second controversial decision of us getting off of the city dispatch system, which was antiquated and dated, to be kind about it, to get onto the state radio system, which allows us to be able to communicate with any jurisdiction throughout the state of Connecticut off the state system. And we are very close 3 years later for us pulling the trigger. We have all the radios, we have the hostess. We are in a great position to finally, after literally 30 to 40 years, have radios that our firefighters can use and count on, because at the minimum, that's what they deserve. You know, and I tell any and everybody that will listen, the most important person in the firehouse is a firefighter. The most critical is a company officer. Company officer has legitimate authority from the chief, but is on the piece with the men and women. And nothing happens in any fire department USA without firefighters having the tools that's necessary for them to adequately do their job. So my number one priority as a chief of the department is make sure that all of my men and women go home. We are not going to have another line of duty death, especially for something as simple and mundane as poor radio communication. That is just unacceptable. So ES&T, you know, the feelings were hurt. ES&T is our dispatch. You know, however, it is what it is. They'll get over it. Had support from the mayor's office to make the transition that we did, and all of our members bought in. So we're about, I'd say, 60 days out from rolling out our new Motorola's and our SDI accountability system. And I'll let Leo go into more detail about the capability of the radios as well as the SDI.
So before we get to that, I just want to congratulate you on your membership. You know, unfortunately, you had to suffer a line of duty death in the city of Hartford for a lot of these changes to take place. You know, we see a lot of departments that suffer line of duty deaths, and they don't honor or respect the fallen by making the progress that you have. So congratulations. But I also know now why you don't have any hair, because I'm sure that was not an easy process to get to this point. But a few things you mentioned, I hope that Leo, that is why I want to step in, that you can also educate us on, because what I've recently learned is we upgraded our portable radio system, but the portable is only good as the system that it's communicating with.
Correct.
And we're in the process of a capital improvement project to increase our infrastructure, so our actual system. You know, so we had a lot of firefighters. Oh, you got these new great radios, but they don't work any better than the other ones. because we're still talking on currently on the same system in the process of upgrading that. So maybe for those like myself a couple months ago who was unaware of that, you can kind of add those pieces into the conversation here to help educate us a little today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sam, please feel free to contribute to the conversation because given your extensive communication background, there's a misconception that if you get a new portable radio, that it's somehow going to miraculously work better. Well, physics are physics, right? We can't change physics. And that's where the infrastructure comes into play and why it's such a critical aspect. The other unfortunate aspect that we have in public safety is a lot of our users are comparing our portable radios to our cell phones. And municipal governments don't have financial resources to build out an infrastructure like Verizon or AT&T, where they could get into those hard penetrating buildings that are just very difficult to talk out of. So what we had to do was we had to reevaluate, given the multitude of departments that are involved in our communications, right? We have the Hartford Fire Department, and then we have Dispatch, which is its own separate entity, which they maintain our citywide radio system. And then we also had to include the Hartford Police Department because we want that interagency communication. And so what we found was, in our particular instance, we only had a single site, and that single site was to cover the whole city of Hartford. And while it provided incredible outside coverage for the 17 square miles that we operated, 90% of our job as firefighters are indoors, and it did not provide exceptional indoor coverage. So while we had standards like the International Building Code and all these other avenues that we could approach, getting like BDAs, bidirectional amplifiers, or other methods to go ahead and increase in-building coverage, we were finding to our dissatisfaction that a lot of those standards were being amended at the state level, where those requirements for BDAs are being removed. And really, it's quite an expense on the building owner to go ahead and install that equipment. So we said, all right, given all these parameters, and in all fairness, the codes, the new adopted codes have now included those standards. But with an exception, a clause that the building has to be renovated 50% or more renovation in order for those standards to go into effect, or any new construction.
So every building is now modified 49%.
Right, 49%. So this is
new construction. Do you have a square footage requirement? Like, so for example, in Montgomery County, with I think it's 25,000 square feet and greater, they have to install a BDA system in the building.
You know, that's a great question. I don't know. And that's something we're still investigating because the law is relatively new for us. It was just adopted. A lot of municipalities have chosen to go the ordinance route at a very local level and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We have not been so successful within the city to get that ordinance passed. So we're really dependent upon the standards to go ahead and enforce these requirements. So given everything that all the obstacles we faced with the AFG, with the Assistance Firefighter Grant, we said, all right, well, we have this citywide system. How can we integrate into this citywide system at the time, which fortunately, thanks to the chief and his leadership, we're now going on the Connecticut Land Mobile Radio Network, the state system, which provides a far superior coverage. We said, all right, well, we know we don't have the in-building coverage, so we're going to go from using trunked talk groups to going now simplex, and then using in-vehicle repeaters to get the simplex information back into the system.
VRS.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
We went VRS. Yep. And so that was the route that we were going to go, because currently we have our talk groups, which are on the system, but then we also had a talk around channel, which really was a dedicated simplex channel. It wasn't a true talk around channel, which the guys would go to, but then they were disconnected now from the rest of the command staff. And so that talk around channel wasn't being rebroadcasted. It was just localized to right there on the fire ground. And we said, all right, well, we needed to bridge that gap. And that's what we ended up doing. And so Freeman, with his leadership, and also the guys saying, hey, we need to address this, fortunately put together a team of retired Assistant Chief Frank Costello, retired Deputy Chief Terry Wright, and I, and this is where we got to work and where we are today. So in all of this, as Chief Freeman had brought up, it was the line of duty death of Kevin Bell. One of the things that had come about was accountability on the fire ground. And this is where the SDI, system definition accountability system, was phenomenal, in that all you had to do was turn on your radio and then it would pop up on this command board, this digital command board, and I knew exactly who was there. The unit, the riding position, and the person assigned to that riding position, along with any emergency notifications. I could send out task alerts and so forth. Because let's be honest, we all have ID tags, right? And depending on how your department works, you're either supposed to give your ID tag to the incident commander, or the incident commander may have somebody go around and collect the tags. Well, firefighters are like moth to a flame. They see fire, they go. So if your first due assignment, they're going to go straight to work. And then if your senior officers should arrive and they establish command, well, you already have the guys in the building. If some may have the fortune of having a chief's aide, others may not, who are going to collect those tags. So this is where, just by simply turning on the radio, it just started populating, and we're like, great, now we have accountability.
But it says who's on scene, but it doesn't say where they are and what they're doing, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So you know what they're doing if you have an SOG that First Division Company goes here or there.
Absolutely.
Correct.
So you know who's on scene, but so we're still missing the piece, which everybody is, of tracking, and that's the thing that's hard for any command officer, is tracking where they actually are in the building.
Right, correct. Yeah. And so to this day, given what I know, I would say the in-tracking of personnel in the building, what would you say, 10 years out, Sam? 10, 15 years out? It's very difficult. It's very hard to do.
Yeah, the military has it. I mean, they use it, and it's like anything else. I at night sometimes I listen to these. I don't want to call them conspiracy theorist podcasts, but some of these stuff, like they talk about, you know, what's out there, and I won't believe with all that stuff. But they say the military is about 10 years ahead technology-wise, right? So that stuff's operating very well. They've proven it in the battleground, and I would say 10 years.
But
that'll be great. We'll know exactly where the person is. Boom.
Right,
I think my wife has that same technology because she can locate me anytime she wants. So
yours and mine both, brother.
yeah, they have the fortune of not dealing with the FCC and exposure limits and everything else and so forth. So it's very beneficial for them.
And to Chief Ritchie's point, even though we can't determine exactly where the firefighters are through triangulation, that of course is coming. Motorola, was tinkering with it years ago, but it never really materialized as something that was reliable. However, the incident commander can assign the respective companies to whichever division or group they're assigned by the IC. So
that's a great feature.
We do have that control, drag and drop. It's phenomenal, and what I really love about it is you can literally press a button in regards to engine 5 report to rehab. And that audible, that computer generated audible goes either you can send it to one person or you can send it to the entire company. And that firefighter or that officer, that audible will come out, report to rehab. And then in order to acknowledge that message, they have to click their PTT. And when they hit the PTT, the incident commander sees it on the digital command board. So that's for report to rehab, that's evacuate the building immediately, that's PAR, you name it. We can program whatever we want with computer generated audibles and have direct lines of communications with one person or every person on the fire ground. It's phenomenal.
That's impressive.
That's really exceptional. Yeah.
Are you using anything like that, Sam, in Montgomery County yet for accountability?
So we're about to switch over to a P25 phase 2 system, a Motorola system, and we're increasing our number of radio sites. And I think once everything, instead of flipping the switch with every piece of technology at once, we'll get that in place. We'll update our radios. We're at the APX 6 and 7000 in the field right now. Across the board, there'll be 8s. And I believe that technology will be right after that, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I love the fact that, you think about your PAR checks, how time consuming that can be on the fire ground, and that you can send a burst out to the radio and you click your PTT and that person's PAR, the PAR is even on the fire ground like that. I think it's a beautiful thing. really is.
And one thing that we recognize that is a liability, if you will, in regards to safety is, so you have a company working as Division 3, and that truck officer is with one of the firefighters, the pipe man, and they're breaching ceiling, and so you have the other two firefighters on the opposite end of the floor. They're working, and when we send out that part check, let's say all the firefighters acknowledge, we don't consider that company to have full par until the company officer hits his or her PTT, because we want that company officer to get eyes on or to verify with 100% certainty that that firefighter is accounted for. So that's the checks and balances that we had to implement or put into our department procedures. So we just don't have firefighters indiscriminately holding themselves accountable, and then lo and behold, they're not.
So
Yeah, it's important. And it goes back to the incident commander charting. That's new to me. I just went through our battalion chief's process, knew nothing about charting other than I would see my incident commander, our battalion chiefs writing things down on a piece of paper. But yeah, that's where that tracking goes to, and you assign your divisions and groups and verify the par through them. And yeah, but and having that redundancy is huge. I mean, because let's face it, depending on where you're operating and how you're operating, you do your par and you think everybody's there. Having that extra piece of technology piece, I think, it's awesome. It's incredible stuff.
And I like what the chief said about giving the power still back to the company officer, so he or she could actually physically check, because it puts in a human redundancy.
Absolutely.
Because the technology, one thing that when I was in the basement, I had 2 radio failures confirmed by Motorola and utility when they confiscated my radio and looked at it. There was a connection failure, and then there was a mic failure with the shielding in the mic. And it turns out that when you look at the mics, there's a letter, and I'm sure that you guys are more familiar with it than I am. There's a letter for each version of mic that comes out. So the old radios that Leo's father and I started with, I think there was probably 1 or 2 mics for that portable radio. Well, now Motorola, which is great, we rely on it for our men and women that come home and communicate. They're already down. Do you know how many letters they're down on mics now? It's like G or F all the way. And they started at A. So they keep changing. So they get new technology. This is going to make it better. And then we find out a problem with it. So I like the human redundancy in that too, because technology sometimes causes more problems.
So these are some of the big system issues, right? And some of the big system fixes. But how about those for the firefighters and those officers out there that are watching today or going to listen to this in the archive version? What can they do different? Are there things of, carrying the radio, field level maintenance, battery checks, cleanliness of the radio? What are some of the things that you've seen and you've identified that you want your company officers to make sure that their firefighters are doing every day or weekly or monthly, that impact their ability for the radio to work the way it's designed?
So, if I may, I would say the first thing is look at the equipment you have and see what its full capabilities are. A lot of the times, so one of the fortunate parts for the Hartford Fire Department is that we have our support divisions who are dedicated to us, like the fire alarm communication technology, like the equipment maintenance division. And so with back in 2016, when we started taking on the radio responsibility again, once we started investigating what the true capabilities of the EDAC system were, we realized, wow, a good percentage of this system wasn't being utilized that could have potentially had different outcomes in different situations. And we're like, all right, so now we started taking an interest into how this works. And so when we got the Motorola radios, we were from the forefront at the programming, getting all the people certified by Motorola and programming there's over 4,000 programmable features in the APX 8000 radio.
It's amazing.
Yeah, CPS.
So what we did was a collaboration of both administration and union. We started working then on the noise canceling features. And we would have the guys go in the building, doing a live burn training, completely supervised, controlled conditions, use the radio, come back out. Yeah, Leo, not good enough. All right, make a change, go back in the building. Better. All right, come back down. Oh, that's excellent. All right, let's take it a step notch up. All right, come up too much. All right, let's back it off. This is going to be our point here. And just going over the evacuation tones, the emergency button. What do we want to have happen with the emergency button? Do we want to do a channel reverse? Do we not want all things that for the past 30 years, the Hartford Fire Department was even aware of to when we started taking an interest into our technology, the equipment that we have, and started exploring that for the best possible outcome for the safety of our firefighters. And now we're responsible for it. And we stay on top of it. We make sure that whatever new firmware releases that come out from Motorola or whoever, whichever vendor, that we're capitalizing on those features and seeing how they could benefit the department. In terms of holsters, we've made the decision to go to the holsters and carry it on the hip. Microphone placement. One of the very simple things is when you look at the Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2 manuals, IFSTA, whoever you decide to go with, what do they always say? Hold the microphone 1 to 2 inches away from the mouth. What do our guys do? No, we're going to have it here on the shoulder. And we're going to hope it works. And it's like, hey, either a $6,000 or a $15,000 radio.
I like when they key the mic over here, I look over here and
Right,
talk.
right. And then
That's
Not the money shot.
it's really the best. The first thing is, I would say, proper radio etiquette. Use the radio the way you've been taught in Firefighter 1 and 2. And then 2, look at your technology, look at the equipment you have, explore and see what options are available.
Chief, have anything to add to that?
No, Leo described it perfectly. I mean, as a chief, the only thing I would add is don't leave your freaking radio on the tailboard when you pull off. We've had that happen a few times.
That's expensive.
There's been one of the motivating factors with us going with the radio straps. But more importantly, we certainly did our research. I say we, but Leo did his research on where should our radios be? Should they be in the pocket on our PPE? Should we use the holsters? And through the science, we made a decision to go with the holsters.
And do you require the radios to be worn under the jacket, or do you allow them to be worn over the jacket? Under. Good.
I like them under. The officers that tend to wear them on top, they seem to want everybody to know they're an officer for some reason. I don't know. It's just right, Sam.
Yeah.
They want to show off their custom leather radio straps.
Yeah, but when it's under, you want to make sure that the antenna is still coming out. Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, you want to be able to, when I presented at FDIC on treating your radio like your SCBA, I talked about ways to solve your own communications issues. And, any portable radio is is designed to operate vertically, right? So if you're pinned under something or you're laying on the ground and you can't get up, a simple reorienting your radio vertically can yield you great communications gains. Or if you can get it somehow above or higher, if you're standing, that kind of thing. It's just, and it goes back to knowing your radio, and knowledge is power. And a lot of folks, the reason I started this whole treating your radio like your SCBA thing is I noticed, the radio is the most utilized thing on the rig, and it's the most it's the most misunderstood or understood and maintained thing on the rig. So I'm not talking about like the radio shop. The radio shop does a great job, and our tech ops section does an exceptional job of keeping us keeping us squared away. It's literally coming back from a fire. We had a fire when I was at Four Corners Company 16 there in Colesville, where the truck officer's radio just didn't work, and it didn't work because it had debris that had fallen into the antenna well and gotten under the antenna and basically fried the board. That's the little board that's right under there for that antenna. Just the intensity of that fire and the amount of water flowed and everything else, like that radio had to go out, and it just didn't need to be bench tested. It needed to be, clean. It's a thorough PM of it. And recently, we started this Taking It to the Streets initiative in our department, where company officers are presenting on YouTube Live, and it's a monthly thing. The first one we talked about cleaning your radio. We actually had a Motorola endorsed tutorial on how to properly clean your radio after a fire. We clean our SCBAs, we clean our face pieces, We send our gear out to be clean, or we do gross decon, but the radio seems like it's always missed, right? So we added that education piece to our folks, and in hopes that everybody's going to follow, right?
And you did something at FDIC with the difference. I don't know whether it was watts or whatever it was. I'm sure you could explain it. The difference between a dirty radio and a clean radio. I'm like the truck guy here. So.
Yeah, I had a very crude watt meter that I got off the internet, and I took a brand new clean radio and transmitted, and I took a dirty radio, and it wasn't too hard to find a dirty radio. It was fire season, height of the fire season, and I just literally went to the firehouse I was assigned to, and I found up to a 30 to 40% difference in the amount of power and capability to transmit and receive that radio had. It's significant.
Yeah, I think there's an important piece. I know I just looked it up because I obviously didn't remember. I knew it was Fairfax County, but they did that great report in 2013.
Yeah.
The radio system. And they discussed on the proper way of carrying the portable radios and what they found as far as signal loss between the radio pocket, between the portable underneath the jacket, cantered away from the body versus vertical to the body, having the dirty radio. Another report's a little bit old, but for those of you that are looking for at least a foundation of what maybe Fairfax County did that may be applicable to you, that was published in 2013. Fairfax
PJ, that was the report too that talked about radio ejections out of pockets. And it was originally thought this was going to be a great idea, and it turned out not to be such a great idea.
Yeah, well, that Velcro is not fire rated, right? So you run one good fire and that Velcro is shot. Right. You know, it's not that Velcro is meant to be married 100%, and you run one good fire, some heat gets under it, the Velcro just it's not. You know, it's the Achilles heel of our PPE, right?
Something that Leo said that I think is important is that you talked about testing with firefighters, testing in a live burn, figuring out what works. I always thought, completely naive, that when you got a radio, you just got a radio. But I've learned through this process now, your radio is set up a little bit, just the portable, the settings are set up different than New Haven, different from New York City. So I think like we're actually set up, and I don't even know what the word set up means. So I kind of want you and Sam to explain this. But I was told like when we did our test, we ended up being between where New York is and where Hartford is. So you really do got to test. So what's that mean by radio setup? Because I guarantee that there's a lot of chiefs out there that are just like me who thought you just, hey, I got the radio and I'm all set up and go. And they might not even realize that they should look at and test their radios, even if they've been using it, because maybe there's a setting that would work better for their jurisdiction.
So one of the things that we did right off the get-go was we tried to reduce the feedback, right, as much as possible. So immediately we went into the audio settings and started adjusting the audio settings within the radio to eliminate that feedback, because that's the Achilles heel when it comes to fireground communications for all of us. And so there's multiple aspects, multiple methodologies as to how to address that feedback issue. We could probably have our own talk show just about that. So what I would just say is explore the various options that you have available to you in the radios you have, either Kenwood, Harris, Motorola, whomever. Bendix King. I love Bendix King radios.
Wobbers.
Yeah, there you go. So just explore. Like we prefer to keep the automatic gain control. Other departments prefer not to.
Explain what the gain control is to our listeners, because most people probably have no clue.
It's adaptive audio. Let's put it that way. So I am trying to stay away from the science behind all this stuff, only because I don't know the audience. We have to,
sensitivity to what it detects, right? I mean, that's probably the best. Sensitivity is probably the best word to use, I would think, for gain. Yeah.
Doing a good chief thing. When we were filming Fire Engineering Tactical Perspectives, I heard somebody say gain, because I guess it works for cameras too. So I just walked up to the film crew and said, you might want to increase your gain. And I kept walking by, and the rest of the thing, they thought I was like this big film guy.
And so, that's the other thing. And also multiple departments will go ahead and actually fluctuate the wattage with which their radio operates at. And so it's not overlapping and interfering, because they may share only one simplex channel.
Okay, so before we get to the watts, on the gain, when we set up our radios, going off Montgomery County and Hartford's different. When we set up our radio, we found out that the best way for somebody inside to talk was, and it's, I think you said it earlier, it's 10% technology, 90% people. So we actually put out there that for the way our radio is set up, the best way to hear them per our setup, this doesn't mean that it's for your setup, is to actually take the mic and stick it on the exhalation valve, and you can hear it really clear. For your setup, what are you having your men and women do with the mic?
Oh, absolutely. Very much the same thing. And that's what we've been taught in Firefighter 1 and 2, right? That's
voice diaphragm. Yep.
Got to bring it right up to the voice port on your mask. Because down here, so that's why we kept the gain control, because I have this philosophy, right? So if we have 100% problem, 90% are people, 10% is hardware. I can replace the 10%, but I can't replace the 90. So that's why we kept the gain control, because if I got that one firefighter that's a little hesitant and changing, hopefully that gain will go ahead, the sensitivity will help with that individual who's having a hard time making that transition. Ideally, what would we like? To have them come up to their voice port on their mask. It takes 2,000 repetitions to change a mindset to where it's habitual. And I got a guy who's been on the job for 25 years. Good luck with that. So it's a compromise. And that's where working with your department and your crew to establish what that's going to be.
Okay, now for the watts thing, dispatch is on a different watt, projecting at a much higher wattage, correct, than the individuals on scene. So that's why a lot of departments like the simplex, because dispatch talks to command on another channel and doesn't override the firefighters on scene. Can you speak a little to that?
So that is also going to be department policy specific. A lot of departments do it very different ways. Like in Hartford, we have a dispatch channel, which is our fire dispatch. Then we have incident 1 through 5. Those are our incident channels. And then what we've done is we've gotten a number of simplex channels to marry to our incident channels, which through the DVRS, we're able to hear back on our incident channels.
DVRS is a vehicle repeater?
Yes, a digital vehicle repeater. Yep. And so, departments vary greatly, right? So it'd be a little difficult to talk about that, because I'm sure you do it differently down in Maryland, correct?
Yeah, I don't know what the setting split is these days, because in talking about how many options, the Motorola CPS, basically the programming software to make all those adjustments, very complex. And we went through a series of reprogrammings where we had this thing called fat fingering, where like people would like not put in the right thing exactly. And we had some serious issues, and we addressed it and basically tightened that part of our tech ops down to a core group of folks. And I'm not one of them. I'm like the Walmart greeter of comms for our team. I'm more on the operational side, managing our training and that kind of thing. I could sit down and do CPS, but I think I can't even remember what our split was, but the split was between when we were on this system, we were a certain wattage, and when we were on a simplex channel, like when we went to our talk around, it was a higher wattage, right? Like it was a 3-5 split, or I don't know exactly what it was, but that's all programmable, and that's what you're talking about, right? I mean, it's all programmable in Motorola CPS to make those adjustments.
Yeah. So right now, currently, what we have is our incident commander will have 2 radios, one on fire dispatch and then one on the incident channel that they're using for operations, and that's how it works.
Now you have a chief's aide too, correct?
We do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And then depending on the size of the fire, operations, which would be Assistant Chief Rodney Barco, he'd arrive on scene, and then of course Chief Freeman, depending on the complexity of it and so forth. And well, the tour commander as well, now that we have Car 6. So that's one thing that we're going back and forth with, because right now the incident commander only uses one radio, and now we're having an individual from SOC that's basically serving as their aide or incident management thing, actually transmit the updates to
communications. What I like to see about it is it's starting to build up the captains on SOC. So hopefully that it'd be a way to kind of mentor them, that when they get to that command position, it's going to help them not just be throwing the fire. They're going to know how to give the radio reports. It's all just practice. But so they're wearing 2 radios. What's the command aide wear? Or is he listening to? How do you guys operate your command aid?
So that really boils down to the relationship between the deputy and his aide and how he wants to set up that structure, because it could vary. It could vary. Your deputy could be on the incident channel, and your chief aide could be on the fire dispatch channel requesting additional assignments, or it could be the reversal. It really comes down to the level of trust between the two.
Yeah, so typically the aide is working the command board at the command post. The incident commander is on the incident channel. The aide is on the dispatch.
Okay.
So the
Okay,
aide
so it's
communicates
similar.
exactly. So the aide communicates pretty much any and everything to dispatch, while our chief officer can focus on the fire.
Right, and it's always going to come down to trust. When I was in Montgomery County, living inside the Beltway, there was a battalion chief in DC that used to give the radio to the guy who rode the bike.
Yep.
Citizen just rode the bike and chased fires in that neighborhood, and the individual would actually give the radio report, and he was better than some chief officers.
Absolutely.
I mean, literally, he was a homeless guy who had a bike who would ride around, and the fire department loved him. They would feed him. And he was a great individual, never to be a fireman, but he would actually, I'm not recommending that. This is in the early 90s, but they used to let him talk on the radio, and he would say on the radio, the battalion chief said, is how he would start his reports. So, and they'd be standing right next to each other. So it'd be something good for our command officers to learn, that when they're at the command post, they should be together.
There's so many complexities. So like in dispatch, they're only obligated to monitor fire dispatch. They're not obligated to monitor the incident channels. And so this is where I would say anybody listening in on that incident channel, and it happened to us, where if you hear a mayday, call dispatch and say, hey, I think I heard a mayday. And that happened to us. Another company who wasn't on scene, they were just buffing the fire, heard a mayday, and miraculously it didn't get picked up. And they called dispatch and say, hey, I think you got a mayday at that fire, which then they called the IC and it's like, yep, we're working on it. And it's like, okay. And so just, if you hear something, say something, and it'll go and make a world of difference.
And that goes all the way back to Hackensack, New Jersey.
Right.
You know, Hackensack, New Jersey, 1989,
It was back then.
87, 89. You know, you had the detective from the police department
Right.
heard some of the maydays and called into communications.
Yeah.
Their communications center had a policy that the dispatchers don't interfere with the fireground operations. You know, so that's some of my, as we said in the beginning, my fight for our communicators to make sure that we give them the right education that they need, so they know what to do in those situations.
And
those
in New Haven Cove Street fire, everybody on scene missed the radio transmission for an individual. It was before we had a formal mayday policy. They were just calling for help. But it was the dispatcher who heard it, who said the command, you have a firefighter calling for help.
And that's
So
not
the dispatcher
that's
saved
not
his life.
uncommon.
That's right.
Yeah, that's not uncommon. So we do have one question, and it's kind of very different from what we've been talking about. It shows the diversity and the reach of the show. We have a question from a volunteer member, which I'll hit his first. My opinion, coming from the combination department, he asked what our opinion is as far as individual volunteers getting issued their own portable radio. All right, so there are a lot of departments out there. I know my department, in our previous radio package, every career firefighter, now we have much less, we have 44 positions, so it's financially a lot easier. At that point, we issued every career firefighter their own portable radio. There are all volunteer departments out there that issue all of their members portable radios. You know, they figure they're in their community, they're in their neighborhoods. It's important for them to have that ability to communicate in a time of need. For our department, our recent radio purchase, we did not issue portable radios to every member of the department, but as a safety officer, I was very adamant that we will have a portable radio for every riding position. Every riding position has an FCVA. Every riding position will have a portable radio, and that was where I kind of drew the line in the sand. It was an easy line to draw because the chief was in support of it. However, that's where we've gone to, because we found that the maintenance and the upkeep of the radios was a significant problem when we had membership taking them home and maybe leaving them in their car overnight and the battery getting drained on a cold night, or forgetting it or not cleaning it. So that was our issue in our department. So we no longer do that. Sam, I'll start with you. What's your opinion on that for, an all volunteer department, on whether they're tossing back and forth the ability to issue all their members portables or not?
So it depends. I know my home department has a mix of it. Their line officers are issued portable radios because they still have home response folks. If the fire occurs in their neighborhood, they're not going to pass that fire to go to the firehouse and get the rig out. The rig's going to get there, maybe minimally staffed, and they're going to supplement that staffing. I think it all boils down to radio discipline. If you issue them individually, there has to be a semblance of discipline, and that discipline includes radio decorum, when it's appropriate to use the radio, when it's not, maintaining the radio, not keeping it, that vehicle thing. So we've had in the National Capital Region, not just Montgomery County, we've had radios stolen out of cars, out of other personal vehicles. I personally carry a portable radio. I'm issued one because I'm a radio nerd for our department, and it has our battalion chiefs are issued. A battalion chief and above get a radio. Every captains, company officers, and firefighters, it's assigned by position, right? But if I'm parking anywhere other than and even in my driveway, I bring it inside. Like I'll disassemble, I'll unscrew the antenna and stuff it in my glove box. So it really boils down to discipline. And if the all volunteer department has a home response policy where, hey, I don't need you to go assemble at the firehouse and get 4 people on the rig, go to the scene. Okay, all right. So Mrs. Villani left to go get her eyelashes done. Okay, Frozen's on here. It all boils down to discipline, right?
Right.
It's going to depend on the department, and a lot of it's going to come down to cost. But I think the thing that we can probably all agree on is that every position should have a radio when they're on the fire ground. And believe it or not, there's still departments in the country where still has just the officer has a radio. And how New Haven got radios for every person, and I stole it. I'll use Thomas Edison, borrowing brilliance. Somebody did the stick in Worcester after the Worcester thing, where they did vacation photos with their family. So I did the same thing with our safety committee with the chief's office, and I put up my vacation photos. And I said, oh, look, we went to Disney World. Look, the guy picking up gum off the side of the street. Oh, he's got a radio. The lady who made our beds in the hotel, I had a picture of her, but somebody did that in Worcester. And I took like the 15 slides. And the funny thing is that the chiefs didn't realize at the time, this is when PowerPoint was new, they didn't realize that I could see what was behind me. So when I started, it said, vacation photos from the Richies, and all the chiefs were laughing because they thought that I was on the wrong thing. But so reach out to other departments, make sure that everybody has a radio, but there's an important lesson here. And this goes for career and volunteer. Just because you have a radio doesn't mean you should talk on the radio.
And that brings me back to, I'm not sure who coined it, whether it was Chief Avillo or Chief Duffy. You have an acronym that I love in my communications class. It's called DIMWIT, right? Don't be a dimwit. And doesn't matter what I'm transmitting, right? And if you can ask yourself that, do you want to be a dimwit or do you not want to be a dimwit before you actually key up that radio to make sure that you're given the right information?
John Kay, who's a Detroit firefighter who was a student living with us, put it in perfect things. He goes, listen, if you mess up on a fire ground and you own it, your reputation's going to suffer a little while, but you'll be able to get over it. And the people on the fire ground will know that you made a bad move. You make a bad move on the radio, nowadays, the whole entire world knows that you made a bad move. Everybody's listening to the radio now. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's everywhere.
Absolutely. So Frank, it's we got about 5 minutes left. I know we haven't even scratched the surface on radios and communications, but I know it's important for you and the chiefs to talk about strategic planning.
Yeah, because I think this is brilliant what Hartford did under your leadership and the past chiefs, and the fact that you were able to continue it and have somebody in planning, because we all know the assistant chiefs are, there's the demands of a city department are so high, and to be able to have somebody in planning that can put pen to paper, that can work with the chief's office, I think is steps above where most departments are. So if the two of you, if you want to go first, Chief, and explain how you utilize the planning section. So essentially it's like ICS of having a planning section, but
That's
it's there permanently, which we need. So
Absolutely.
go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I'll be brief. I want to let Leo give him opportunity to really weigh in because, again, he's doing a phenomenal job in the new position. So when I first assumed command of the department, the position was strategic planning captain, and only uniformed members were able to apply. And to make it fair and equitable for every member of Local 760, I lobbied the local and asked that they open it up to all members of the union. And they agreed. And we were able to, thankfully, get the best and most qualified candidate in the position. And with Leo, he manages not only our short-term strategic initiatives, but also our 5-year community-based strategic plan. He's also responsible for maintaining our ISO Class 1 designation, which we were able to obtain February 1st, 1991, the first department in New England to get Class 1. And he's also now our accreditation manager. And as of March 3rd next week, after 1:30 p.m., we will be the first accredited department in the state and the first Class 1 and accredited department all in New England.
Congratulations, Chief.
Thank
Great.
you.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your hard work.
So Leo has his plate full with maintaining that standard of excellence, and really in all due respect to all of our retirees, such as Leo's father, Chief Siri, and everyone who's worn our uniform. They gave everything they had to the Hartford Fire Department, the city of Hartford, and they set a very high bar. So our goal, my administration, is to make sure we make all of our retirees proud, and we're putting the department in a great position to be successful and thrive with every member that comes after us, even when we're long gone. So I don't know if Leo has anything to add to his duties as strategic planning manager, but as the chief of the department, to have someone with his capability to be in that seat, I mean, the sky is certainly going to be the limit for us moving forward in the future.
Well, thank you, Chief. And to expand upon what Chief Freeman has said, it's really it's the people. It's a team effort, all the way from the chief of the department to the firefighter on the front lines, and working together collaboratively that we were able to gain our accreditation through the Center of Public Safety Excellence, and then also maintain our ISO Class 1. And really what it is taking all the hard work that we know that we do and extracting that data and presenting it in a format where others who may not know exactly what it is we do, how we do it, why we do it, and why it takes what it takes to do what we need to do. And sometimes and we've all been there. Let it be from multiple factors of, oh, well, why do you need this many people? Or why was your response time this? Or it's to answer all those questions, to provide transparency for those individuals as to what it is we do. And it helps tremendously, particularly during budget time and the community outreach. And yeah, I'm grateful for this opportunity that Chief Freeman has presented for me to go ahead and continue on this legacy that's been spearheaded by first Captain Kevin Kassane and then Captain Daniel Riley, and I hope to continue on their success. And so also among the ISO, CPSE, we also have all the AFG grants and everything else, and it's the exploratory and the technology to really go after every bit of money that we could possibly go after and bring into the department.
And having the big data to back up the requests.
Right.
It's so crucial that many departments don't understand the importance of having that data to answer those questions, to fill out those AFG grants, and to justify why you need X piece of equipment or X number of dollars. So that's great. Congratulations. You're doing a great job.
I think I sum up the data portion of the fire service, right? Because there's not a salty firefighter out there that may wince a little bit when anyone brings up data in the fire service. But it's so critically important in the 21st century fire service for us to continue to adapt. I mean, Hartford, we've always been an aggressive department. We will always be an aggressive department. I just tell our members we're going to have calculated aggression. But at the same token, as we say, we're pretty darn good at what we do. The response from a citizen will say, well, I hear what you're saying, but prove it. Well, the data tells the story, and the data is objective. And that's why it's so important for us to continue on our history and tradition of being that aggressive fire suppression organization, but then also embodying what's critically important to any fire department success, which is being able to objectively tell your story with data. Because as the chief of the department, it's not my opinion when I go to City Hall and ask for certain things. It's the data stating that this is a necessity, not a desire. And that's why it's just so important. And I hope all departments across the country, all roughly 25,000, truly embraces the importance of gathering data, analyzing data, and presenting data, because it only helps the department. And if it helps the department, it helps the firefighters. And there's nothing more important, as I stated earlier, than a firefighter.
And if it's helping us, it's helping those in our community, the reason that we're all here.
That's right.
So, Frank, I'll turn it over to you, and you go around the room or close it out, however you want to end the show today.
We're at 1 o'clock, so we want to thank Sam Villani and his family for put her on air.
So I did, let's see, a diaper change, a clothing change, and 2 programming changes, milk, juice, and goldfish on those 2. Yes, I feel pretty accomplished on top of one.
We appreciate that. And we really thank Chief Freeman, Leo from the Hartford Fire Department, to come on and highlight all the great things that Hartford is doing. And on the strategic planning part, and I'll quote Tony Harp, our past mayor, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
That's right.
And the data is so important. I'm going to leave one thing with data. Well, we need planning, the 1-year plan, the 5-year plan, and the 10-year plan. And chiefs out there a lot are afraid to plan because they feel that, well, I'm going to have budget constraints. Of course, well, then you alter the plan, but the plan allows us to measure our success going forward. We all understand the money crunch out there. So I think that's important. On the fire side, just to back up what Chief Freeman was saying, which is so important, is on your NMFRS forms or whatever reports you use, our members do a great job when fire's blowing out a window. But our citizens, that's not really what's important to them. They don't care that you made a push down the hall, and maybe the apartment upstairs does, but all of those belongings are lost. That's a horrific day for those individuals. What matters to the people, our citizens that we protect that are living there, is when we stop the food on the stove call from becoming blowing out the window. But yet our fire officers, and this isn't just a New Haven problem, it's a problem across the country, our fire officers will go and say they won't take the time to estimate the value of property saved. So at the end of the year, when you do your report, you get a report that says, this is how much property was lost. And then they do the report for property saved, and you will be surprised how many departments don't capture that data because they don't estimate it, or the number is only a certain number of officers that do it. Phoenix has become really good at ensuring you get food on the stove. They take the value of the house and they estimate, and that's what we try to do in New Haven too. So you'll have a property saved, because to the occupant, if you can save their belongings, their clothes, their pictures, that's a success. And firefighters need to stop going to the firehouse and stop going to the politicians and say, oh, I didn't do anything last night because I went to food on the stove. No, you made the most impactful thing that you can do to the citizens that we serve, and we should have some pride in that. Yes, we want to make that push, but we got to take care of the people that we're serving and realize that we got to collect the data. I'll let PJ give the last word tonight.
Just thank you. Appreciate everybody turning out and listen to us today. Don't forget, FDIC is around the corner. A bunch of instructors here. Make sure you register for your classes, your classrooms, your workshops, your hands-on training, and look forward to seeing everybody there. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Sam.
you.
Take care, Sam. Thanks.
Thanks.